Hello and welcome to the Startup Operator Roundup. I am Roshan Karyappa.
And I'm Gunjan Saha, and together we'll be breaking down the biggest headlines from India's growing startup ecosystem. In this week's roundup, we have much to discuss. We'll be talking about...
Hey, hang on. One sec. It's not a blocked number. Hello?
Good afternoon, sir. Myself, Keshav.
Yeah.
We have exclusive offer for you, sir. We have personal loan based on your credit rating, sir. How about 22% interest rate, sir? Nobody gets this kind of rate.
No.
Sir, please, sir, try,
thanks.
sir.
Thanks, I'm not interested. Thank you. Good. Sorry, I forgot to opt out of my friendly consumer finance company's dial list. So.
Alright, so in this week's roundup, first up, we have Apple's WWDC event and of course the launch of Vision Pro. Now, this is something definitely we should be excited about, as this will set the temperament for what the whole AR and VR industry might shape up into. Next, we'll also talk about the breakup of the largest brand within the VC ecosystems. Sequoia is now splitting up into 3 different firms. This move has caused quite a stir within the investor community and the startup ecosystem in general. And we'll delve into what this means for the future of fundraisers and the startup landscape. Also, FinTech's loss guarantee scheme has received approval from the RBI. This is a major development that could have an impact on the way new age credit companies service their customers. So stay tuned, and if it's the first time you're tuning into the channel, don't forget to subscribe and check out our other videos as well. Roshan, fantastic week. The sun is shining and a lot of things to discuss. But what are some highlights from your side?
Well, I can't say highlights, but last week we had some interesting comments from Mr. Sanjeev Bajaj, who is, of course, the CEO of Bajaj Finserv.
He wasn't the one calling you, right?
No, not him, right? I mean, just another, whatever consumer finance company that was. Last week, Mr. Sanjeev Bajaj, who is the chairman and CEO of Bajaj Finserv, made some interesting comments at a business forum. He said that, responding to a question on spam calls, that is somewhat of a running joke about Bajaj, right? I mean, that everyone gets a call at some point. I've myself blocked maybe half a dozen numbers. Yeah, I mean, he said something to the effect of, if you want to not get the calls, just opt out of it on our website and don't come back to us when you want credit, right? I mean, it sounded a little bit like a threat, if I can say so myself. But interesting times, right? And Bajaj Finserv has done fantastic work over the last 10 or 15 years. I guess, that little bit of arrogance is justified. The business performance has been amazing. But yeah, we'll see. And it seems like every week we can't take the geopolitics out of whatever we discuss, right? I mean, last week, India and Nepal have struck an energy deal, a 10-year energy deal. Nepal produces a ton of energy, right? And
especially hydroelectric energy.
Yes, hydroelectric energy. So we have a deal to consume this power. And interestingly, we have also stipulated that, it can't have anything to do with China. None of it should be produced with Chinese infrastructure or support. We'll be consuming this power over the next 10 years. And yeah, as you mentioned, hydroelectric. So all of the sustainability and the green energy fans out there will be thrilled about this. But interesting development for sure.
So last week we saw, Apple make some really major announcements in the Worldwide Developers Conference. But I think apart from the iOS 17 highlights and all the other various features they announced, the highlight was, of course, the Apple Vision Pro headset.
Of course.
Right? I think with this announcement, the whole conversation around AR and VR technologies again sparked up. The last time I remember reading about AR VR was when Jio decided with their Jio glasses. Right now, I think Apple is the latest giant who has forayed into the AR VR space. Otherwise, there are companies like Nintendo, Microsoft, Meta, Google, and even Sony. But if you look back at their 5-year, 7-year journey with AR and VR technology, none of them have really made a long-lasting mark. But here we have Apple, probably the world's most loved consumer brand. Their Vision headset, of course, looks amazing. The whole UI looks amazing. Do you think this will stand the test of time?
Well, it's too early to tell, but it's Apple, so you can best believe that this is going to last in the market, right? See, AR and VR has been the next big thing for the last 20 years, I think, right? And every year it's been that, okay, now it'll come of age, and now it'll come of age. We've been talking about this since the time of Magic Leap and HoloLens, and recently with Oculus and Meta and all of this stuff, right? And we're yet to see this become really, truly mainstream. And of course, Apple didn't build the first smartphone. But of course, captures a huge share of the smartphone market today, right? And it seems a sort of a similar approach right now as well, right? With this Vision Pro as well. The whole form factor and everything looks astounding, actually. It looks really, really nice, very sophisticated and everything. And yeah, primarily at this point, I mean, it seems like more or less for, entertainment and, some mild office work like emails or whatever else, working on your documents and so on. Obviously, the beauty about Apple is how they're able to sort of bring that hardware, software, and more importantly, the ecosystem together, right? And I'm sure that, the Vision Pro will become way more effective once people start developing apps on it. The developer community kind of comes together and builds out these use cases. So we're early, I would say, but this is something that was expected, right? I mean, now the iPhone, is probably in its 13th or 14th version. And then, the watch as well has been around for a while now. So what else? What next? And this was expected. This was expected that there will be another massive unlock, right? And they have to think of the next $500 billion market, right? I mean, at their size, that is the kind of numbers that they're talking about. So the Vision Pro is not cheap. Of course, it's around $3,500 right now. Could be about 3 or 3.5 lakhs here in India.
Price of a entry variant hatchback.
Exactly, right? But, I guess, as the market matures, the price will come down. But more importantly, this makes AR and VR sort of mainstream now, right? Because with Apple's heft, I'm sure that, we'll start developing more use cases. I'm personally excited about, stuff in healthcare, for instance. If we can do something on that front, that would be amazing.
So do you think with the whole effort Apple has been putting, especially Tim Cook, since he made a lot of public announcements about Apple pursuing AR and VR technology, do you think this headset will be the iPhone killer that everyone has been waiting for?
So the basic form factor in terms of how we consume the internet hasn't changed, right, in the last 50 years. It's the laptop or it's the phone. It's a screen, basically, right? And this is not a hands-free experience at this point. So this is something that has been awaiting disruption for ages. Will it be something like the Vision Pro? I don't know, right? But it looks damn good. It looks good enough to sort of disrupt that, right? There are a bunch of these mid-journey images being generated on, what the future will look like. Frankly, it looks a little dystopian, right? Everyone walking around with those headsets. But I don't know, man. I don't know what the future has in store. But surely, there will be the next form factor. We don't know what it is, but this could be the best bet.
All right. Another major headline from last week was the whole Sequoia unit splitting up into 3 different entities. They will be called Sequoia Capital, Peak 15 Partners, and Hongshan. This move is an effort to manage the complexity of running decentralized global investment business while still providing high-quality services to clients. The new entities will be headed by Roloff Botha, Neil Shen, and Shailendra's Singh respectively, who will be working to ensure that the transition is smooth. Now, in separate interviews, they have been citing various reasons, but broadly it can be categorized, of course, with the ongoing geopolitical tension between the US and China. And the second one is that while all of the portfolio companies ultimately come under one umbrella, a startup that's funded by Sequoia in the US could be a direct competitor to a startup that's funded by Sequoia in Southeast Asia. So they wanted to manage that as well. So yeah, probably with this breakup, Sequoia will be able to better manage its portfolio companies to reduce competitors among each other. But what do you think? How will this shape up?
It definitely signals a new direction for Sequoia India for sure, right? But it's also, I think, sign of a maturing ecosystem, right? Indian startups today, obviously compete with their counterparts in the US and China. Aside from the geopolitical tensions with China, maybe Sequoia India felt that they could operate a lot more freely if they didn't have this conflict of interest kind of a situation with their US counterpart, right? It may very well happen, and it has happened that, Sequoia portfolio company in India is somewhat of a competitor to someone in the US. Right, and so I think it's a lot to do with that compliance and being able to operate freely. Sequoia is a legendary brand name, right? it's 50 years in the making.
$15 billion.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how they'll operate without that brand name in India, right? Peak 15 sounds cool, and the team is great, of course, right? A great set of investors and so on. But this will definitely be a new direction for the firm in India. And we saw, what was it? I think year and a half back, they announced this whole $2.8 billion fund as well, right? A significant amount of cash for sure. Let's see. A new chapter awaits, and hopefully that money will come into the Indian ecosystem soon as Peak 15 partners. And all the best to the Peak 15 team.
Yeah. And as a marketer, it's very interesting to read their rebranding blog, right? How they came up with the name Peak 15. And that Zomato trend of whether it's Zomato or Zomato has been really catching up, because Twitter was split, whether it's Peak 15 or Peak XV.
Peak 15, I think.
It's Peak 15.
Peak 15,
but
right, We should have someone over from Sequoia sometime, and talk about this new direction. Yeah.
Yeah. So recently, the Reserve Bank of India has also announced a slew of changes in their policies, right? And one of the highlights being they've allowed for something which is called the default loss guarantee in the digital lending space. Now, this is an arrangement where a third party, like a fintech player, will compensate the lender if the borrower defaults. Now, the borrower is owned by the fintech player. So, from the fintech's perspective, offering DLG is a way to show off their underwriting skills, while from the lender's perspective, it ensures that the platform has some skin in the game.
No, this is, I think, very interesting because so far these fintechs have operated as a kind of a customer acquisition for the lender, right? I mean, the tip of the spear per se. And there have been all sorts of allegations in terms of how aggressive these folks have been in, acquiring these customers and whatnot. Now they will have to, function like a mature financial entity, right? So lending is a collections business, essentially, right? And underwriting is a very, very important part of that, right? And once you assume that risk, then you have to be damn serious. So I think this will be the 2.0 of fintech and lending in India for sure.
And not only this FLDG, but they've announced quite a lot of other measures as well. There's changes in the e-rupee, which is that individual and PPS can now issue their vouchers. Then there is BBPS, which is about membership rationalization, and then Forex card by RuPay, right? That has also been allowed. So, I mean, it just looks like there's no dearth of innovation within the payment landscape in India.
And think about it, right? I mean, a policymaker is, rather than pushing just mindless regulation, I mean, they are actually triggering innovation in India, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so fantastic stuff by RBI, really.
Also, last week we saw a major acquisition by VLCC. VLCC has acquired Usra, which is a men's grooming D2C company. And this was done in a cash and a stock deal. InfoEdge, which is the largest investor in Usra, has had a 30% stake, and this 30% stake is valued at around 60 crores. Initially invested 40 crores into the brand.
I think post the COVID boom, you'll see a bunch of D2C brands roll up into these kind of acquisitions, right? And some of these folks in the offline business may very well sort of acquire these guys. It is really hard to scale a D2C brand. Like I've mentioned before, I mean, it's not a bits and bytes business. It's a, atoms and molecules and physical business, right? And scaling it requires, setting up distribution, being a national brand, whatever it's. By the way, we did this fantastic episode with Arindam of Attenberg. I think I've pitched it maybe like far too many times on the roundup, but do check it out. It's a fantastic episode. Talks about how to scale a D2C brand. In fact, we put out we put out a D2C episode last week as well with GD Prasad of VS Money. All said and done, it's not easy to scale a D2C brand, and you will see a bunch of these happen. I think Usra had raised probably 400 crores, and 200 crore acquisition is clearly not the best. And the bad news continues for InfoEdge, right? I mean, with the 4B networks last week and then this happening. Yeah.
Funding momentum still continues within the ecosystem. We did have some notable fundraisers, even though the check size has slightly dipped from what we have followed in the past 2 weeks. Healthify Me has raised $30 million in a pre-Series D funding round, which was led by Leapfrog Investments and Khosla Ventures. Electric vehicle financing platform for individuals, RevFin, has raised $5 million from United States International Development Finance Corporation. Trading Leagues, which is a fantasy stock gaming application, has secured $3.5 million in pre-Series A round. This was led by Leo Capital. And this is interesting. There's an elderly-focused lifestyle platform called GenWise that also raised $3.5 million, but this is in a series funding round, which was led by Matrix Partners India. Wide variety of startups.
I think in India, probably we're seeing the first or second generation of elderly folks who have to fend for themselves, right? In the sense that, the family, the joint family way of living has disintegrated. Obviously, we're all nuclear right now. And a bunch of these folks, obviously, urban folks are living abroad, living in other cities and so on, right? So I think we need to create this support infrastructure for elderly folks, for sure. And I'm glad that people are investing in this. Healthify Me is fantastic. I've long wanted, someone from there on the podcast. Maybe we'll host them sometime to understand, how they have that fantastic engagement on the app and how they've been able to tide through a bunch of these market changes, because Healthify Me is one of the older apps, right? They've seen through the consumer internet dip, then they've seen through a bunch of other stuff happen, right? So yeah, and they actually make money, Yeah, fantastic business. Would love to, host someone from Healthify Me on the podcast as well.
All right, so for the talk of the town section, of course, the entire buzz on Twitter was about Sam Altman, visiting India, meeting the Prime Minister of the country, addressing business conclaves. And over there, Rajan Anandan, MD of Peak 15, he asked a question to Sam Altman, asking, can India build a foundational LLM like ChatGPT? Well, this was definitely an interesting segment.
Sam, can you just going to startups? I mean, as you know, we've got a very vibrant startup ecosystem in India. Specifically focused on AI, are there spaces where you see, let's say, a startup from India building, you can build on the models, be it ChatGPT and many others. But if you want to build foundational models, how should we think about that? Where is it that a team from India, 3 super smart engineers with, not 100 million, but let's say 10 million, could actually build something truly substantial?
Look, the way this works is we're going to tell you it's totally hopeless to compete with us on training foundation models. You shouldn't try, and it's your job to try anyway. And I believe both of those things. I think it is pretty hopeless, but.
So what would you call that, cocky or confident?
A lot of people on Twitter took offense to this, people said, how could he say that we can't build and all of that? I was less irked by something like this. I think it's a usual tech CEO answer, who would want to encourage competition? Maybe the occasion was, slightly larger than the usual, tech conference. And there were people maybe not completely accustomed to that kind of arrogance that's there in these, tech conferences, right? And anyway, Sam is on this whole Bharat Darshan, as I call it, right? Which is why, I guess people sort of thought that he was being really arrogant. But I hope, it pisses off a few engineers, it pisses off, a bunch of these entrepreneurs and investors, and they decide to do something about it, right? India has lagged behind on deep tech, on a lot of these foundational technologies, because, at a per capita of 2,500 USD or thereabouts, there are more obvious ways of making money. You can create value in tech through arbitrage and more obvious solutions, right? So we haven't had to focus on this kind of deep tech as such. But one thing we have realized is when there is a market opportunity, the Indian entrepreneur is very quick to jump, right? Look at SaaS, for example, right? You have companies in Bangalore, Pune, Coimbatore, Surat, wherever, capturing market share and eating into Salesforce and Workday and Oracle and all of the mega billion-dollar successes from the valley, right? So I also don't think that it is a question of having the best sort of resources at hand and whatnot. By that measure, OpenAI should not have succeeded, right? Google has had hundreds, if not thousands, of the best researchers. Certainly, Apple, Meta, all of those folks have had, and OpenAI was sort of like a weird non-profit experiment with $100 million funding, right? Which is really nothing for something like so foundational. Yeah, exactly, right? So, in fact, there's a very interesting, bit of segment that I read in an article where, Satya Nadella is talking to the head of AI at Microsoft, and he's basically saying, how did these guys do it? How did a bunch of 100-something people build something like this? And I suppose this is pre the time that they decide to invest in OpenAI, right, Microsoft. I do feel that we're at the very beginning of something transformational. You can't call the race yet. And I hope that, the engineers in our country, wake up to the fact that we need to build stuff like this in order for us to lead the future. Good for us and good for Sam. Thanks so much for lighting this fire, and I hope many people respond to this. In fact, I saw a tweet by Mr. C.P. Gurnani, who is the CEO of Mahindra Tech, say something like "challenge accepted" or something, right? So let's see some money flow into this. In fact, I think Peak 15 itself should invest a bunch of money and make it happen.
Yeah, and talking about investing, I think OpenAI also has started a startup fund, right, in which they look to invest in companies building through OpenAI. All right, folks, so last week we put out a very interesting conversation with GD Prasad of VS Money, and some really wonderful insights and the conversation felt like he was actually talking from experience and not from reading a marketing
I mean, I met Prasad after a long, tiresome day for him. And man, this is why I really appreciate the entrepreneurs who come on the podcast, right? I mean, look, their founder time is really scarce, really limited, and they're actually making time to give back, right? So yeah, it's hard, man. I mean, it's a hard space to get started and scale for sure, right? And each of us has had some kind of a consumer product idea, whatever that is. Maybe it is your favorite recipe or something that your mom makes, or maybe you figured out some nifty way to solve something around the house. Everyone's had a consumer idea, right? I mean, how do you kind of take it to the masses? And that really is what the focus of that episode. Fantastic content. Do check it out.
And we also have some really interesting speakers lined up, but we would love to know from you who you would want us to feature next in our interviews. So let us know in the comment section below, or you can reach out to us via social media handles. And if you want to be notified of such interesting developments right in your WhatsApp before you start your day, then please do check out the WhatsApp link in the description below. Apart from that, I guess that's it from Roshan and I. We'll be back again with more exciting updates next week. Take care.
See you guys.